Jamal had been awarded the scholarship. Staring at the screen, disbelief and joy collided in a rush of tears and laughter. He called his mother first, her proud cries echoing through the phone. Rachel, later that day, scrolling through local news, spotted an article about the scholarship winner and froze. There was Jamal's name, bold and undeniable, his photo beaming confidence. She sat back, tears welling up, feeling a strange mixture of pride and sadness. Jamal prepared for the next chapter of his life, packing books and dreams into suitcases, knowing this opportunity was more than just a trip, it was proof that his story was far from over. Rachel stood by her window that evening, watching city lights flicker, her heart full of quiet gratitude. Their paths, once so intertwined and then painfully severed, had led them both to places of growth neither could have imagined, still marked by the past but no longer trapped by it. Jamal's departure day arrived with a bittersweet quiet. His mother hugged him tightly at the airport, whispering words of love and hope into his ear. As the plane lifted into the sky, Jamal stared out of the window, a rush of emotions swirling, fear, excitement, pride. Rachel, on that same morning, was hosting her biggest mentorship event yet, standing before a room full of young adults eager for guidance. Even as she spoke confidently, a part of her wondered how Jamal was doing, if he had found peace in the new chapter he was stepping into. Jamal landed in a new city, the unfamiliar streets both intimidating and thrilling. He kept his journal close, writing down every new detail. Rachel, later that night, sat with a colleague, reflecting on how far she had come since the fallout. Both Jamal and Rachel were stepping into new spaces, still tethered to old wounds but carried forward by resilience. In his new environment, Jamal faced fresh challenges. The cultural shifts, the weight of being far from home, and the relentless self-doubt crept in at unexpected times. Yet, every time he picked up his pen, he remembered why he was there. His classmates admired his courage and his sharp, honest voice in workshops. Rachel's mentorship program became a model for other cities, and she was asked to join a task force on youth mental health. Walking into the city hall meeting, she felt the weight of old failures but pushed through, speaking from experience rather than theory. Jamal, after a long day of classes, walked through quiet city parks, feeling both alone and fiercely alive. Rachel, finishing her day, received an email from a parent thanking her for changing their child's life. Both of them, across continents, were redefining what success meant, learning that healing was a process of many small, brave steps. Jamal's essays began gaining recognition in his new school, with professors urging him to compile a full collection. He hesitated, unsure if he was ready to revisit all the pain and triumphs of his past, but something inside nudged him forward. Rachel, meanwhile, was honored with a community service award, standing before a crowd that once would have doubted her. As she gave her acceptance speech, she thought of Jamal, of their tangled history, and the silent bond that still lingered. Jamal, in his small apartment, pinned a note above his desk, "Write the truth, even when it hurts." Rachel, filing away her certificate, felt a quiet peace settle over her. Though their lives had moved in different directions, both were creating legacies from the lessons they had learned, weaving their separate threads into something lasting. Neither knew if their paths would ever cross again, but the impact of their connection remained undeniable. One afternoon, Jamal received a request from a well-known publisher interested in his work. The offer felt surreal, and while excitement bubbled up, so did fear of exposure, of reopening old wounds on a much bigger stage. He called his mother, who reminded him that his voice mattered now more than ever. Rachel, now consulting with national mental health organizations, began developing new training for therapists, weaving in stories and case studies that echoed parts of her own journey. Late at night, she sometimes reread her old case notes, reflecting on what she had learned and lost. Jamal, sitting at his desk, drafted his response to the publisher, deciding to step into the unknown once again. Rachel, leading a workshop, looked into the eyes of young therapists and saw their hunger for change. Both were embracing roles they never imagined, shaped by a past they no longer ran from but carried with thoughtful intention. As months passed, Jamal's manuscript took shape, each chapter a piece of his soul laid bare. His professors marveled at his discipline and honesty, pushing him to dive deeper. Rachel's national training sessions became widely respected, her voice now one of quiet authority in the field. One spring morning, Jamal walked into a local bookstore and saw an early preview of his work displayed, a moment that took his breath away. Rachel, at a conference in another city, was asked to share her most pivotal experience, and for the first time, she spoke openly about Jamal, not by name but in essence. Her voice wavered but grew steadier with every word. Jamal, signing his first contract with the publisher, felt a deep sense of completion. Rachel, stepping off the stage, knew she had finally told the story that had lived in her shadows. Their lives, separate yet entwined by invisible threads, had each found a new horizon. Jamal's book was officially released, and the buzz it created stunned him. Reviews poured in, praising his unfiltered honesty and sharp insight into youth, race, and healing. Jamal attended his first book signing, hands shaking as he met readers who shared how his words had shifted their perspective. Rachel, back home, read every review, feeling a bittersweet pride. Though she remained anonymous in his pages, she recognized the moments, the struggles, the lessons they had both lived through. Jamal's mother attended his launch event, her eyes shining with tears, knowing that their darkest days had led to something no one could have predicted. Rachel, sitting alone on her porch one evening, closed the final page of Jamal's book, whispering to herself that it was worth every battle. Jamal, now seen and heard by a much wider world, felt the beginnings of something even bigger stirring inside him. Invitations rolled in for Jamal, speaking engagements, panel discussions, interviews. Each time he stood before an audience, he remembered those early sessions in Rachel's office, the quiet, painful unraveling that started it all. Rachel, meanwhile, found herself training new cohorts of mental health professionals, weaving in lessons about humility, boundaries, and the hard truths of human connection. One evening, after a particularly emotional speaking event, Jamal received an anonymous letter. The writer thanked him for his bravery and hinted at having once been part of his journey. Jamal read the letter over and over, heart pounding, wondering if Rachel had reached out in her own quiet way. Rachel, that same night, placed a copy of Jamal's book on her shelf beside her old therapy textbooks, feeling a complicated mix of closure and pride. Both continued their paths, carrying unseen connections that shaped their every move. Jamal's success didn't shield him from moments of deep doubt. After a heated interview where his views were challenged, he spent hours pacing his apartment, questioning if he was ready for the weight his words now carried. Rachel, too, faced setbacks, pushback from more traditional voices in the field who questioned her evolving methods. Jamal's mother reminded him during a late-night call that growth always brought resistance, and that staying true to his story mattered most. Rachel, sipping coffee with a trusted colleague, confessed her fears of repeating old mistakes but was reassured that her transparency had already changed lives. Jamal, lying awake that night, realized that his journey wasn't just about personal healing but about challenging deep-rooted systems. Rachel, closing her laptop, understood that her redemption was not in perfection but in showing up fully human. Both braced themselves for the next steps, knowing the work was far from over. A year passed since Jamal's book launch, and he was invited to speak at an international conference on youth advocacy. Preparing his speech, he revisited old journals and therapy notes, tracing the arc of his transformation. Rachel, meanwhile, was honored at a national ceremony for her contributions to mental health reform. Standing on stage, she scanned the crowd, humbled by how far she had come. Jamal's keynote was raw and powerful, earning a standing ovation that left him breathless. Rachel, watching a live stream of his speech from home, wiped away tears, silently cheering him on. Jamal, after the event, stepped into the crisp night air, feeling the weight of history and hope pressing together. Rachel, turning off her screen, whispered a quiet thank you to the universe for allowing her to witness his rise. Though miles apart, their journeys continued to mirror each other in ways either could fully explain. Jamal's work was nominated for a prestigious literary award, and news outlets buzzed with coverage of his inspiring rise. Rachel, attending a roundtable on ethical therapy practices, found herself quoted in national publications. Their names, once hidden in the shadows of scandal, were now associated with progress and courage. Jamal walked the red carpet at the award ceremony, flashing a nervous smile, while Rachel attended a quiet fundraiser, speaking to parents about the importance of mental health access. Jamal didn't win the award, but as he stood on stage to present a reading, he felt victorious simply being there. Rachel, back at her office, received a letter from a student inspired by her talks, reminding her that real success isn't always public. Jamal and Rachel, on parallel paths of purpose and redemption, continued stepping into new roles, their once wounded pasts now fueling legacies that mattered. Jamal began teaching part-time at a local university, guiding young writers eager to find their voice. In his classroom, he saw fragments of his younger self, uncertain yet burning with unspoken stories. Rachel, meanwhile, expanded her mentorship program to include workshops for at-risk teens, traveling to schools that once wouldn't have welcomed her. Jamal's students often stayed after class, sharing their personal battles, and Jamal listened carefully, offering encouragement shaped by lived experience. Rachel, standing before a group of exhausted school counselors one evening, spoke about resilience, not as a buzzword but as a hard-earned truth. Jamal, grading papers late into the night, smiled at the raw honesty he found in his students' work. Rachel, driving home after another long day, felt something unexpected: peace. Both had come full circle, not erasing their pasts but using them as the foundation for meaningful change. Jamal's mother attended one of his lectures, sitting quietly at the back of the room. Watching her son command the space with grace and wisdom, she was overwhelmed with pride. Afterward, she hugged him tightly, whispering that his father would be proud too. Rachel, preparing for a keynote at a national summit, revisited her old therapy certifications, marveling at how far her understanding had grown. Jamal took his mother out for dinner that night, laughing and reminiscing about the rocky road that had led them here. Rachel, standing before a packed auditorium, shared stories of failure and recovery, emphasizing that healing is messy and never linear. Jamal, walking his mother to her car, promised her that no matter how high he rose, he'd never forget where he came from. Rachel, stepping down from the podium, felt a deep sense of gratitude, for second chances, and for the people who helped her become whole again. A surprising invitation arrived for Jamal to collaborate on a national initiative focused on mental health awareness in schools. At first, he hesitated, wary of institutional red tape, but after much thought, he agreed. Rachel, coincidentally, was asked to be part of the same advisory board, unaware of Jamal's involvement. When they walked into the first meeting, their eyes met across the room, a flicker of recognition, respect, and something more complicated. They exchanged polite greetings, both aware of the heavy history between them. Throughout the session, they contributed ideas, each noticing how much the other had grown. Afterward, Rachel lingered by the door, and Jamal approached, their conversation tentative but sincere. Though either spoke of the past outright, there was an unspoken understanding that they were now allies in a greater mission. As they parted ways that evening, both felt a quiet shift, as if something long unresolved had finally begun to mend. The board's work progressed quickly, with Jamal and Rachel finding themselves in regular meetings, brainstorming strategies and presenting to key stakeholders. They learned to navigate their renewed partnership with professionalism, occasionally sharing small, personal reflections that hinted at deeper layers of trust rebuilding. Jamal, after one intense strategy session, admitted that seeing Rachel's commitment to change had helped him heal in ways he hadn't expected. Rachel, moved by his words, confessed that working alongside him was a reminder of why she had entered the field in the first place. Their collaboration became one of the initiative's strongest assets, with others on the board admiring their synergy. Though their relationship was no longer therapist and client, They found a new equilibrium, one built on mutual respect and a shared purpose. Both left each meeting feeling a little lighter, their once tangled stories now moving forward in parallel harmony. As the initiative launched nationwide, Jamal and Rachel were invited to co-present at a major educational conference. Standing side by side on stage, they shared their intertwined histories, framed not by scandal but by growth, resilience, and redemption. The audience listened, captivated by their honesty and the raw power of their story. Jamal spoke about the loneliness of misunderstood youth and the transformative impact of being truly heard. Rachel followed, detailing the painful lessons she had learned and the ongoing journey of earning back trust. Their presentation ended with a standing ovation, and afterward, attendees flooded them with questions and gratitude. Jamal and Rachel stepped outside into the cool evening air, standing quietly for a moment. Rachel finally broke the silence, thanking Jamal for his grace and courage. Jamal smiled, saying that in the end, they had both found their way. Together, they looked up at the night sky, each feeling an unfamiliar but welcome sense of closure. Months after the conference, Jamal received an unexpected message, a thank you note from a young man who had attended his speech. The note was short but powerful. You helped me understand that my story matters, even when the world doesn't care. Jamal read the message several times, feeling the weight of its meaning. Rachel, meanwhile, had begun working with a new group of clients, each with their own struggles and stories of being erased. One afternoon, after a particularly challenging session, she sat in her office, staring out the window. She wondered if she was truly making a difference, or if the systems they were fighting were just too vast. Yet in her heart, she knew that even small changes mattered. Jamal, reading through letters from other young people he had impacted, felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had once been where they were, and now he was the one offering hope. Rachel, too, found strength in those quiet moments of connection, when her work spoke louder than words. Jamal was invited to speak at a prestigious youth advocacy summit. It was a defining moment for him, a chance to shape the conversation around race, mental health, and the legacy of trauma. As he prepared his speech, he remembered his first encounter with Rachel, the confusion, the tension, and the eventual breakthrough. Now, his words were powerful, his voice clear and steady. He spoke not only to inspire but to challenge the audience to act. Rachel, attending the summit as an observer, felt a mix of pride and humility. She had been a part of Jamal's journey, but his voice was now his own. The summit was a turning point, both for Jamal and for the mental health field. They realized, separately but together, that they had become catalysts for change. That evening, Rachel sat in her hotel room, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She didn't need recognition to know she had made a difference. Seeing Jamal rise was enough. Back home, Jamal began mentoring young writers, helping them craft their stories. He saw in them the same anger, the same desire to be seen that he had once felt. Rachel, in her own practice, started a program for marginalized youth, creating a safe space where they could speak without fear of judgment. It was a modest start, but she saw the potential to make a real difference. One evening, Jamal's old high school called him in to speak to a group of at-risk students. Standing in front of them, he saw faces that reminded him of his younger self, lost, angry, and searching for something. He shared his story, not as a success but as a testament to resilience. The students listened, some with skepticism, others with a glimmer of hope. Rachel, after a long day of consultations, read through the thank you letters from the youths she had helped. Each one was different, but they shared a common thread: thank you for believing in me. Both of them realized that healing wasn't linear, it was messy, painful, but infinitely worth it. Jamal's book had become a staple in schools across the country, and he found himself regularly speaking at high schools, universities, and community centers. Each time he stood before a new audience, he wondered how many of them had been silently fighting battles like his. Rachel, too, saw her influence grow. She received invitations to speak at mental health conferences, and each time she took the stage, she was reminded of how far they both had come. But the work was far from over. Jamal knew that the real change was in the spaces where people didn't expect it, in the conversations happening after the speeches, in the quiet moments when someone felt heard for the first time. Rachel, sitting in her office late one evening, wrote a letter to herself. A reminder that healing was a process, and she had to allow herself to grow too. Jamal, sitting by the window in his apartment, stared out at the city lights, knowing that his journey was just beginning. And yet, for the first time, he felt peace. The final chapter of Jamal's journey had arrived. He was preparing for a nationwide book tour, the culmination of years of hard work, healing, and self-discovery. Rachel, having shifted into a role of overseeing programs for at-risk youth nationwide, was finally able to step back and acknowledge the weight of her contributions. The two hadn't seen each other in months, but they had both reached a place of understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement that their lives had forever intersected in ways that transcended professional boundaries. On the eve of Jamal's tour launch, he sat quietly in his apartment, holding the book in his hands, reflecting on how far he had come. Rachel, across town, stood in front of her office window, feeling a quiet sense of gratitude for the young man who had taught her as much as she had taught him. The world was still filled with challenges, but they both knew that, in their own ways, they had contributed to making it a little bit better. And in that knowledge, they found a lasting peace.